The notice, the idea of the notice is that the landlord has to give you something saying, I intend to remove you from this home unless but I'm not going to be able to file for a certain number of days. So it's like a chance for you to kind of fix the issue or at least know in advance that it's going to happen. So it depends on the situation, how many days you get. If the landlord wants to remove you because you haven't paid rent, then they have to give you a 5-day notice. That means that you'll get a slip that says there's a 5-day notice. You have 5 days to pay up all the rent you owe. Otherwise, we are going to file an eviction lawsuit. Lease violation is similar, but it's 10 days. And that's something like, for example, if your lease says no pets and the landlord finds out you have a pet and they don't like that, they could give you a lease violation notice, and you have 10 days to find a friend to take your pet so that you can, comply with the lease. And then the last thing, I know you might be looking at this and you're confused. There's a lot of numbers here, 30, 60, 120. What's up with that? So this is lease terminations, like when the landlord decides, I'm not going to renew your lease. Not because of any particular reason, not because of like unpaid rent or lease violations, just we've decided to not renew your lease. The reason why there's multiple numbers here is because Chicago recently passed this law called the Fair Notice Ordinance that kind of gives different numbers here. So it depends on how long you've lived in your unit. If you've lived in your home for no more than 6 months, and the landlord says that they're not gonna renew your lease, they have to give you 30 days notice. But if you've lived there for more than 6 months but less than 3 years, they have to give you 60-day notice. They have to give you 2 months notice. And then if you've lived there for more than 3 years, they have to give you 120 days notice. So that's a lot of time. So you got to figure out which one applies to you. And by the way, this applies whether you have a year-long lease or you're living on a month-to-month lease. Doesn't matter, the same rules. So the other thing that's interesting about this is the notice requirement for them to not just tell you that they're going to terminate your lease, but also for rent increases. So if you've been living, let's say you've been living in your home for like 8 months, okay? And then you find out that the landlord wants to increase the rent for your next lease. So like when you start your next 1-year lease, they have to give you 60-day notice of the rent increase because you've been living there for 8 months. Between 6 months and 3 years, you live there 8 months, so you get a 60-day notice. So again, this notice is about lease terminations, and it's also for rent increases. I think that's pretty interesting and important to know.